G'day, mate. 40 here. Want to get back to the topic about what do we do with the lonely and those who just don't bring anything to the table. That they are such a downside to your life because they're so toxic, right? People who are incapable of normal human connection. Like, what do we do with those people? So I was listening to a fascinating episode of Decoding the Gurus. It was talking about the 2012 Paul Thomas Anderson movie, The Master, which seems to be based on Scientology. Anyway, we got Kyle back. Kyle, any thoughts on this topic?
I have been troubleshooting audio for the past little while, so can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
All right. So the topic I was thinking about was this issue of people who people don't want around, or people who are lonely, have difficulties making social connections. I think I would weight things more heavily towards people deciding that they don't want these connections, mostly, right? I think that people tend to be of two minds. Everyone is of two minds when it comes to people. On one hand, people desire connection. They want friends. They want positive experiences. But on the other hand, people are also, they come with downsides, right? And I think what happens a large fraction of the, as opposed to, this is distinct from hurting them. This is distinct from being abusive. I think people can get extremely, extremely abusive and still find social connections, still find a lot of social connections. But what makes it so that they can't connect is when they specifically push people away, which maybe they're not even conscious of, but they tend to go down some script where, yes, what they do may be hurtful, but much more importantly, it's also designed to push other people away.
And let's talk about me. Why can't I maintain a group coming on the show? I used to have such a great crowd of contributors, and I've been unable to maintain that. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I can only talk about after the 2018 heyday, when Rushton and you had like all the regulars on. I recall, like, you used to have much bigger chats, right? Dennis Dale and stuff. But in my experience, a lot of the time, you didn't seem to want people. Okay, you either didn't want people on, or you wanted people on an extremely narrow set of terms, which essentially amounted to pushing them away. And it wasn't that you were mean, and it wasn't that you were too demanding or any of that. You could at some points be abrasive, but that was not the problem. The problem was, well, quote unquote problem. You had very strong boundaries, and you tended to push people directly away, right? Like, people would come in and you'd be like, don't talk, right? And you'd get extremely agitated if they would talk, and you'd want them to only speak at very specific points, and otherwise you wouldn't want them on at all. It's a form of setting boundaries in a way that pushes people away, because you would specifically say this, you didn't want the drama, you didn't want the unpredictability of like a freewheeling conversation where people would jump in and out and all that sort of stuff, right? So you're of two minds. You want this connection, but then you also don't want the things that come with it. And I think that the way it nets out is that you don't really want it. You don't really want to have a show with tons of people on it. And, because you're of two minds, you have the part of you that doesn't want to deal with all the drama and all the complication, and you have the part that wants to have all these conversations and viewers and interesting stuff happening, right? I think that is what leads to the confusion. But I just encourage you to remember how agitated you found yourself when things went wrong, right? And how protective you were of your boundaries, of the way you wanted the show to go. I think that predominated.
That's really good analysis. I mean, that is exactly right, and that's true on the show and in real life. That I'm so inflexible that I drive people away. Like I want it done on my terms, my way, and it just becomes so inflexible for other people that they say, "Forget this. I've got better things to do."
But the way that you frame it, you keep framing it in terms of like you being the victimizer, but I don't think that's an accurate framing. I don't think that you're particularly, you know, abusive or hurtful or any of that. I don't think that's the right way to frame it. I think you don't want to deal with all the problems that come with these connections, right? Um, that's
Yeah.
what I think.
I mean, I
And
so
so, like,
go ahead.
you spend huge amounts of time sort of berating yourself when, to my knowledge, you haven't done anything that bad. You're not a criminal. There are so many people sitting in prisons right now who are going to get out, and they're going to get out to, an adoring suite of girlfriends and a very rich social life involving a lot of danger and excitement. And these are, people who really do abuse people, who really do, make people afraid for their life or afraid for their safety and stuff like that. They're not they don't end up being total loners who are kind of hermit like. And I think people who are total loners who are kind of hermit like, can fall into this introspective trap, or I don't know, like they tend to be like, oh well, what am I doing wrong? How am I hurting other people? Blah 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 blah. But the real thing is that they don't want all the problems and all the stress and they tend to have very high standards, right? So like there's this incel phenomena, right, where people don't want well, yeah, the way that they would put it is that people don't want to have sex with them, but the way that other people would put it who are looking at them would say, you don't want to have sex with people on your level, right? Now the same thing can happen socially. You can have people who would want to socialize, quote unquote, but they would only want to do it under such circumstances that it only comes around very infrequently or maybe not at all, right? Um, I think some people just, if you look at their behavior, if you look at their attitude, they don't really want all that much interaction. They don't want it. They don't act like they want it. They're not drawn to it, right? And then they're sad. Um, but it's like I don't know, the I think it's incorrect to frame it in terms of them being abusive most of the time, right? Because as I've alluded to, there are people who are extremely abusive, but they're drawn to people. They always find themselves wanting to be. They don't have to force themselves into social situations. They're just naturally there, right? They're naturally drawn to it, like one naturally eats. And other people are kind of naturally anorexic socially, right? They naturally tend to hold themselves away, and they don't weight that highly enough, right? As the major factor, you know. Some part of them doesn't want all this interaction.
So, what is your guess as to the percentage of the population that most normal, healthy people would have no incentive to have them around because they are so predictably, consistently a negative in one's life? I would put it at between 10 to 30% of the population is just clearly antisocial and just bad for normal, healthy people to have around.
Mm. Do you imagine that like people in prison, like the average person in prison when they come out, they're a young guy. Let's paint a picture. Young Latino guy in prison, right? Uh, he comes out. Do you think he does a lot of talking, or do you think he sits in his room on his computer and mopes about how bad he's been to 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 people in his life? Right? What do you think he does? Do you think he's always at parties? I think he's always at parties. Okay. I think he gets into trouble because he's always a hooliganing around, and he has girlfriends and he has all this stuff. And I just kind of reject the framing. I think other things are happening, right? Like it's not that people are. I think people are much more likely to be isolated because they're boring than because they're abusive. First of all, I think they're much more likely to be isolated because they're avoidant than because they're abusive, and I think they're much more likely to be isolated because they're unhealthy, right? Um, like there was a fellow I knew who was an older man, and he was a smoker. He had COPD. He had a bunch of issues, and he was divorced, and so, like, you look at the situation objectively, this is a fellow who, you know, he's at a stage in his life where he's kind of boring and crippled up. And by this stage in your life, if you're gonna have social connection, it's gonna have to be mostly connections that you've already forged, right? Um, you know, marriage, old friends. This guy was not gonna go out and party anymore because he was his health was screwed up, and he liked to smoke and he liked to drink, and that seems like a very typical picture of the deaths of despair that we see in Middle America and we see everywhere. It's like people they've run out of gas, right? You run out of gas as you go through life, and you're not as resilient to the pain that naturally comes with going out and clubbing and going out and doing anything. And yeah, it's people who lack energy, people who lack vitality, people who just have no place because they haven't carved a place out for themselves in the time they had to do that, right? That's how I would characterize the vast loneliness and emptiness and deaths of despair that we see. Tremendous numbers of people going through. Um, Whereas people who are just too abusive, um, I think there's some of that. Maybe 1 or 2% of the population is. It's not that they're too abusive. It's that they don't know how to dance the dance, right? They step on people's toes socially. They're autistic or something on the spectrum, and they consistently disrupt whatever they're in. But even then, I know someone who is known for this, right? Like I in the pre-corona days, I would go to discussion groups, debate groups and stuff like that. And there was one person who was known to arrive at these groups and destroy them pretty much, pretty reliably, right? Through their behavior. And their social life is still pretty full because they keep going to the groups, right? And they keep on finding new people to talk to, and they never stop wanting that connection, and they don't get discouraged. So this keeps happening, right? If they were gonna look for it and they were gonna like, oh, well, I must recuse myself after this, and I must spend a lot of time on live streams, talking to a few people about all the bad things I've done. People with that attitude, um, I don't think do that much harm, right? Because they're too busy, sort of, you know, s- they're too mired in self-regard, right? The people who really do a lot of social harm, don't have almost any self-regard at all, and just merrily go from community to community, blowing them up, right? This is an archetype, and these people don't strike me as particularly lonely. So, but yeah, I agree. There's maybe 1 or 2% of the population that is just too autistic, too disruptive, too unable to dance the social dance, and so people don't want to interact with them. Not so much because they're bad. A lot of bad people keep on, merrily tramping through group after group or and person after person, but because they can't they can't do the kind of initial dance with people.
So
Maybe turn
there,
them off.
there's a big difference in our perception of reality. I
Yeah.
perceive between 10% and 30% of the population are just going to have clearly a net negative effect on others. So you can call this antisocial personality disorder. But we're talking about people who have a long-term pattern of disregard for or violation of the rights of others, and difficulty verging on impossibility of sustaining long relationships. So I essentially see this as accounting for between 10 and 30% of the population, and you see this as accounting for between 1 and 2% of the population. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, so what do we do now? Do you agree with me that human connection is the primary factor in personal happiness and effectiveness for most people?
I mean, this is kind of a question like, do you agree that water is one of the primary factors in human happiness, right? I mean, it is if it's lacking, but it strikes me as a very myopic perspective to like it's projection, right? I don't think that most people have the well. human connection can be very broad, right? It can include literally everything that you do if you're broad enough. But I don't think that loneliness specifically is is a major factor in more than 30% of people's lives.
Okay, you don't think loneliness is a major factor in more than 30% of people's lives, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I would say loneliness is a factor probably I'd say 30 to 40%, but at let's say the remaining 70%, I would say that the happiness level and effectiveness level of the remaining 70% is primarily determined by the level of their relationships. Like it's hard to be happy if you have a miserable marriage. It's hard to be
yeah,
happy and effective if you don't have friends.
yes, I agree with that. Um,
Okay, so what do we do then? So we essentially agree that happiness and effectiveness, that there is a socially effective personality type, and some people are more socially effective than others. What do we do? Where do the people go who are not socially effective? The people who are lonely and who just don't know how to make their way in an ordinary world, and therefore are particularly prone to, the only people who will celebrate them are virtual communities and cults and con artists and people who are just desperate for converts to their group.
I think we used to have a social fabric that tried to weave people in, and that social fabric is being torn apart. And the result of that is, a lot of people don't have a place. Um, but there's another way to look at it, right? A lot of people don't want to have a place. They don't want to make the sacrifices. They enjoy the sowing but not the reaping. Like I'm thinking of a lady who was basically gallivanted around for her whole life. Didn't do any saving. Didn't marry. Basically had fun her whole life, and then uh, you know complained very bitterly that her family, who she disregarded entirely, wasn't wasn't providing her the support that she wanted in her old age, right? We tend to forget that these old systems that wove people in, they also came with a big bite, with a big sting in the tail. Um, so I think that you know I want to emphasize the role of human choice here, where people, I think a lot of this can be framed as people are choosing that they don't that they don't want the problems that go along with membership in communities. But like the framework is there for for membership, right? You you simply have to make sacrifices. Instead of speaking your mind, you have to toe the party line. Uh, you have to put a significant amount of your time into some group, and I think that people doing that would find themselves having the old social ties, but they prefer the freedom, and then they enjoy complaining about the downsides of the freedom.
I'm just realizing, how much my soul is still in lockdown. I mean, like I ostensibly enjoyed the lockdown so much because I could just stay at home and read books, and I'm just kind of humbled by how much my own soul is still in lockdown, and how inflexible I am in my interactions with other people. How do you navigate the challenges of community, friendship, human connection, while maintaining autonomy and freedom and avoiding strangling ties?
Well, I think it's a life phase thing. I mean, I'm a young man. I mostly interact with people on my own terms. When I want connection, I I join groups. I make friendships. We go out to dinner, that kind of thing. Um, I think I have my own avoidant tendencies, and if I'm honest with myself, it's well, it's tempting to say, "Oh, woe is me, woe is me. I don't have this, I don't have that." But the reality is that, the values that I honor in the breach, as it were, are, I I like to sit down and read. I've always liked this, by the way. Like, even as a child, I would spend my summers reading book after book, right? I would, my one of my favorite times was when I would, in the summer, I would have no school. I would, I would read, like, a few chapters of a book. I would get outside. I would go on a bike ride on my own in the beautiful, fresh, sunny air, and then I would come back and I would read, the next third of the book and then out again. And that was a very beautiful time for me, and I think I'm just a person who is very content alone, you know, most of the time, and then sometimes I'm very sad about it, right? And when I'm very sad about it, uh, it's difficult for me to it can be difficult at some time at some points to realize that my current position is the result of my preferences and my actions, in the very recent past.
Yeah, we have such similar personalities. I mean, you're essentially articulating my own life story there. I'm just curious, when have you been happiest? For me, I've been happiest when I've been integrated into a community. I remember I went on a 2-week Jewish singles trip to Israel. I had a blast. It was fantastic because I was around a group the whole time. And then I went off to Greece for a week on my own, and it was such a letdown. It was so wrenching and sad compared to that feeling of community. And so when I remember one Friday night, I went to church and just feeling alone. And someone from my class like came downstairs and said, "Hey, we're all sitting up here." And so I went upstairs where other members of my class were, and I just got to sit with them during the Friday night service and just had a ball, just had a blast, just had a fantastic time. And so when I got integrated into, the lives of the people around me, those have been the happiest times of my life. So I'm curious, when you think back, the happiest times of your life, have they been when you're sitting alone reading a book?
Probably not. Probably it's it's playing with friends, to be honest. I mean,
Yes,
yeah, the
exactly.
when friendship is at its best. But, like, the situations that you outline that you like are kind of situations with no downside, right? It's where you get the social interaction, but you don't get the attendant obligations. And the way you tell your life story is one where you sort of go from group to group, um, from religion to religion. I think this reflects, uh, that you feel chafed, by the restrictions of these communities, or you find yourself butting heads or whatever. There's friction, right? And I think the thing I would like to see you change in terms of your self regard, or the way that you look at your life story. And obviously, I don't know as much as you do. I don't know a tenth or a hundredth as much as you do. But just my perspective from the little window I have, into your life is, I'd say you should kind of accept the legitimacy of the part of you that doesn't want these ties, right? You become, it results in you being much freer, like infinitely freer than you would have been. And you should admit that you like the freedom. You should admit that social interaction and membership in groups comes with downsides. And often you might not be giving the part of yourself that that rejects those downsides enough credit or enough recognition, or maybe it's not integrated enough into your view of yourself.
Tell you about the most painful decision I made in my life in December of 1997. I decided I wanted to write about Dennis Prager on a blog, and all my friends in LA I had in common with Dennis Prager. Like, I went to synagogue with Dennis Prager. Like, all my friends were Dennis Prager fans. And my closest friends told me, Luke, if you write about Dennis Prager, we will never talk to you again. And so I chose to do it, and I lost all my friends in LA. And I was so lonely after that. I was so broken after that that I started going to an astrologer to like try to heal my relationship with Dennis Prager. Now, out of that loneliness and despair, like I found a path forward. Like I did enjoy the freedom, and I did, kind of get to break out of that particular, narrow mindset. And so, with time, there came many benefits from that choice. But it was absolutely wrenching at the time to like lose all my friends in LA because I wanted to blog about one radio personality. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways to look at that, obviously, right? There's one where you're the asshole, and you're just shitting the bed for no reason. You're pooping in the punch bowl for no reason. But another way to look at it is that people are kind of, well, people have their downsides, and in this case, like, what I witnessed of you in the dissident rights sphere is that you're one of the most thoughtful, one of the most one of the most insightful people in the space, to be honest. And the reaction to your insight and the reaction to your realizations and your honest approach to this space has basically resulted in you being isolated because you keep on breaking the rules of the group you're in. And in the case that I was directly witness to, that was the dissident right. You brought these people on, and you did your intellectual exploration honestly, and people don't like that. People really don't like that, and I think that I surmise at the moment that something similar was going on there. Prager strikes me as a intelligent man, but also uh, a fairly pompous person, someone who's not all that open to criticism, and his whole group strikes me that way. And people are kind of gross the way they respond to criticism, right? Um, it's kind of contemptible, and I I have found that yeah, the reason why I came on your show was that you were one of the more admirable figures in this whole dissident right spit up, and that's what I would say. Give yourself a certain amount of credit, um, and also understand that the deal you made by being honest is one where you're going to be isolated, right? People don't like honesty. Um, it's not entirely that, right? It's also it's also being maybe inflexible, maybe pushing people away. But don't neglect the part where these communities that membership in these communities that you're talking about, right? It comes with a big downside, which is that all these communities have they're all pretty arrogant. They're all you know people in groups, people in mobs represent the worst of humanity, right? And even if they're an up-jumped mob like the Catholic Church, you can still see all those tendencies that you see in a crowd of jeering students, you know, that I've seen in person, where a crowd of jeering students will just circle someone and throw things at them and behave in a completely abominable fashion. You can see the same things in every group, right? So that's the downside, is that you're going to be asked, if you join any group of any significance, to join that jeering crowd of complete moral monsters, and do it uncritically, right? That's kind of the deal. That's the way these these ape behaviors work, right? I think we're an evolved species, and we evolved to mob, just like crows do, just like chimps do. We are a mobbing species, and if you won't join a mob, you're going to find yourself alone, and that's part of the story, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's especially contemptible when these groups form with the nominal purpose of exploring the truth, no matter where it leads, which I think is the case for Prager's group, and the case for the Catholic Church, and the case for a lot of such groups. They will profess themselves to be the haven for truth seekers and such, and then they will behave in precisely the way that you see uh, that you see a crowd of school children behave. Um, they'll behave in a clannish way. They'll behave in a beastly way, and that's how humans are. And I think you feel that pretty keenly, and you tend to that tends to net out in you not wanting the membership, right? Or at least in you refusing to abide by the community standards, right?
Yeah,
Of the different right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I desperately, desperately want the membership, but I'm not willing to keep my mouth shut. And so I try to maintain a membership that is not possible given the things that feel like I must say. And so
Right.
I destroy the membership. I don't just walk away gracefully. It's like with all the Trump supporters who believe the 2020 election was stolen. So in many things, I side with Trump and his supporters, but I do not believe the election was stolen, and I do
Right.
not have any intellectual respect for those who try to make that case because I haven't seen any evidence for it.
Right. But another thing I'll say is that, like, if you were I think you could get away with it, and you could still have a giant Rolodex and all these things if it weren't for the other side of the coin, where you also have very, very strong boundaries and, and, you seem apt to get deeply offended, or at least yeah, I think that's true. I think you are easy to wound and easy to offend. Whereas if you took everything in a more playful manner and you would take your licks, as it were, and you would bounce back and you'd sort of let it if it to you was not carried so heavily, if it was like water off a duck's back, I think you could get away with violating all these standards and doing these arguably anti-group or even antisocial things, and you'd still have uh, you know you would have no lack of connection with people who are members of these groups. But, you know, you have these 2 traits of sort of honesty and, willingness or even desire to confront, group delusions, and also you're kind of, you have very strong boundaries and you're a little inflexible, and you aren't you aren't that desiring of human connection relative to, I think, the human average, right?
Yeah,
Um
I think that the human average is to want to spend about 8 hours a day around other people. And my my inclination, well, my habit or pattern is often just spending an hour a day around other people. So while I
Yes, yes.
think spending at least 4 hours a day around other people would definitely be in my self interest, but my default goes to much less human interaction than would be good for me. I'm just curious about you. Is your natural default for human interaction set at a lower state than would be good for you?
For sure, yeah, I think so. Although, again, good for you is there are times when lacking human connection makes you very, very miserable. There's also misery that is avoided, right? Which is something that you need to also put on the ledger there. Yeah.
And how would
I think flexibility is really important, right?
mhm.
You can be very, very, you can be very easy to wound, and you can be, very very quick to wound others, and you can still have a lot of connection if you're also flexible, right? If you're also willing to sort of take things as they come, and keep on interacting, even if it gets very unpleasant, right? But if you close yourself off, then your range is much narrower.
And that's exactly what's happened. I've closed myself off and I'm streaming to 10 people. Now,
20 people. There you go.
how would you let's say that you decided to make YouTube or some live streaming platform. Let's just say you decide to make it your full-time gig. How would you navigate building up a community of guests and commentators and compadres as you build, if you were to build, say, a live streaming career? How would you navigate these questions?
Hmm. How would you build up? Well, I mean, a big part of it is always continuing to ask on people who who were there previously. You'll do this thing where you're like, the door is always open for all these old people to come on and stuff. But that's not how I would bet that's not how people feel, right? I would bet that they don't feel that the door is open, and you just saying that doesn't really make it so. You'd have to kind of be more expressive, and I'm not sure if that's your authentic self or not. But yeah, the way things concluded, uh, at least in the places where I witnessed it, was in a manner where it seemed like you didn't want these people back, right?
And some of them I don't. I got to admit, some of them I do not want back
Right, right,
in their current state anyway.
right. Yeah, I mean it's a big bundle of headaches. I mean, if you most of the streamers, the big time streamers seem to confess to feelings of anxiety and depression, and all, all kinds of natural results of the stressors of continuing to maintain a large community, right? It's a painful thing. I just
What
wanted to
kind of
bring back Norvin.
yeah
Norvin Hobbs. What a
what kind of community standards would you have on your show?
Hmm. I think community standards are entirely the wrong approach, basically. Like, I think that the healthy thing to do is to have people violate your boundaries, get angry, um, ban them, and then forgive them, right? Kind of in that order. Whereas this community standards thing, like emphasizing like a big set of rules, has the effect of like creating a wall, right? Like a wall of frost. It's better to be intermittently fiery and then warm than to sort of narrow down interaction into a very very small prescribed set of uh, set of norms, and you'll just mostly turn people away by doing that. I think that's kind of my thought. Obviously you should have boundaries and protect them, and the way you should do that, I think, is it's healthier done the way that almost everyone does it, which is just to ban people when they annoy you. Just ban them. Yell at them a bit and ban them, and then let them back in. Um, imagine that you're parenting someone, and instead of just disciplining them when they do something wrong, you respond by creating like a new rule that's set in stone until they're just sort of they're just walking some tripwire of like, oh well, this rule and that rule and this rule and that rule, and again, it has the effect of pushing people away. But yeah, standards. Yes, the standard should be enforced in a human way by you and your moderator team, and it's people who are annoying, people who are disruptive. You ban them and let them back in after a while, and then if they keep doing it, then eventually they're banned permanently. That's what I think. And trying to prescribe human interaction into a set of rules, um, I don't think it's really worth it.
Hmm. And did you pay any attention to Mr. Medica versus Nick Fuentes?
Yeah, I've been liking the Kino Casino. The return of blood sports. I don't know. I think in a sense people don't give Nick enough credit because like what he's doing is incredibly difficult. Being a live streamer and maintaining a large audience, without any partners really on a stream. Like he's doing solo streams for many many hours, and he's maintaining viewership. That takes a lot of wackiness, right? It's a stream of consciousness style where you're going to be able to isolate any parts you want, and say that it's make him look crazy. But I don't know. I'm not unhappy about the way that the the dissident right, the alt right has imploded, because as I as I sort of went through my journey on your show, I kind of realized that their their main thing is being anti-Semitic. So it's like, that's cool. That can be your thing, but I hope you fail. Hope you experience as much pain as possible. I'm hostile to anti-Semites because they're hostile to me. I'm kind of a reciprocal guy, and I don't think it has to be more complicated than that. I think it's yeah. I enjoy their flailing, because I think that they're they hate me, and they hate my family, and they basically wish me the worst, uh, which is fair. Fair enough, buddy, but then I wish the same for you.
So, who do you think won Fuentes versus Metokur?
Um, I mean, I guess Metokur won, but it's it's difficult to say who won when you have these 2 communities that are utterly, divergent, right? Um, I think Nick is trying to do his own thing, and, these Metokur people are trying to do their own thing, and there's no moral consensus between these groups at all, right? They nominally seem very similar. They're both kind of right wing, alt right-ish people, um, who are internet personalities. Uh, but when you come down to it, they have like completely different goals and values and aspirations. Um, yeah, like
And go ahead.
yeah, like Nick has created or Nick has joined a kind of a group of people who are like dark matter, to the rest of society, right? They have their own very specific perspective, and he's kind of been sucked into that rather than co-opting it, right? Um, which is kind of inevitable, I guess, if you're just one person and you're on a no-fly list and you're isolated to the degree that these people are.
And what do you make of the spiraling swatting and doxing, and you just can't go too low between Ethan Ralph's crowd and the Kino Casino crowd and Mr. Medica?
Yeah, I mean, the Kino Casino, I noticed that they tend to kind of frame themselves as being aloof, even though they pretend not to, right? They tend to act as if they're better than this, but I don't know. I think that they're all kind of cut from the same cloth. To be honest, they all seem pretty crazy, pretty antisocial, um, pretty resentful, right? The resentment is big. They resent each other just to a rather astonishing extent, and they hold on to grudges, and it's entertaining. I mean, people like to watch that, which is yeah, I don't know. It's part of why becoming a streamer. It's like you might say, "Oh, I want an audience," but do you want the things that come with the audience, right? Do you want to cater to the tastes of the audience? Do you want all that crap? Because what people want is blood sports. They want personal destruction. They want destructive behavior. Um, and I suppose people can do that, right? It's like Jackass, right? It's like the popularity of Jackass. That's what people want.
So when I say I'd rather have 10 people watching a show where I talk about what I want rather than 1,000 live viewers watching, a blood sports that I'm hosting. Do you think I'm fooling myself? Do you think I'm trying to fool the audience? Do you think I'm being true to myself?
I think you're of two minds. I think that you're
Yes.
kind of sad about the death of your channel, and then you're also like happy not to deal with the drama. And yeah, you want to work on combining those. John Wolfe says they're antisocial, unlike yourself. I certainly have antisocial tendencies, and I'll admit it. Right? Um, Antisocial and avoidant tendencies. Sure.
You're using antisocial in the meaning of not wanting to be social, but as the term is used technically, it means to have a disregard of and violate the rights of others. So,
Yeah. I mean,
so which
uh,
which antisocial are you?
I think on the show I was at times aggressive and cruel and just generally badly behaved. I didn't comport myself in a kind manner. I think it's because I'm just not that kind. That's what I think. I don't think that I can see especially the political tendencies of these folks reflected in me in some ways, and also the personal tendencies in terms of I'm a fairly angry person, and I lash out more than I should, and all that, especially on this show. Um, so I'll cop to that. I don't really. I don't know. I think that the way that these people operate is is I think that they don't like each other, right? They really don't like each other, and we saw a similar kind of thing evolve on this show at certain points where we had a bunch of characters evolve really intense dislike for each other, and we had feuds, and we had like I don't know if we had doxings, but we had something next to doxings, and I think it reflected the personalities of the people involved. Um, yeah, things got kind of dark uh, on this in the Lucosphere. And I think it reflected the tendencies of the people there more than anything else.
So it seems like almost nobody on the distant right has been able to sustain group streaming. Well, I mean, I guess Ethan Ralph does a group show, but what do you make of the inability, generally speaking, of people on the distant right to be able to maintain a group show and instead dissolving into often needless flame wars and recriminations?
I mean, I think it's mostly. Um, I think it's more normal than maybe you're making it out to be. Like if you follow the left at all, you see a lot of similar things happening, a lot of similar things, and I think that like fundamentally we might be underweighting the young man factor. I think young men are assholes. That's what I think. Ricardo says I would ragdoll Kyle if I wanted to. I don't think that's what happened on the stream, bro. But I don't think we're gonna have a rematch. Yeah. Um. Yeah, it's just I think young men are assholes. I think that's an underweighted factor. You know, you can look around the globe, and you can look at English soccer fans, and you can look at the African the African problems, and you can look from the very northern tip of the world to the very southern tip of the world, and you can see young men acting like complete assholes in ways that are even more antisocial and even more nasty than the young men in online politics groups and online politics chats online. So that's what
So
I think.
in these feuds, I mean, they're going after each other's family. I mean, there's absolutely nothing sacred. I mean, Nick Fuentes will say, Christ is king, and then say, well, Mr. Metokur, you'll be dead soon of cancer. You're irrelevant. I mean, Fuentes' behavior just seems to be the opposite of Christ is king. Metokur, the nihilist, and Stixenhammer, the person into the occult, or the so-called Satanist, seem far more Christ-like than a Nick Fuentes. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is it like that big a fucking deal at all? Like they're going after each other's families. I mean, you can look at what people are actually doing in like soccer hooligan groups. Like the groups of Russian Slavs, the psychopaths. They'll run around. They'll beat people to an inch of their lives. Where the rule of law is less strong, they'll do far worse things. And clearly, their behavior is on a vector towards that. Clearly, if there weren't police, these young men would be killing people, right? Killing people, not doxing. Bro, I posted your address online, bro. This is super big deal, bro. They have your address, bro. I mean, people kill people, right? That's what young men want to do. Young men want to kill, as a rule. I think they want to literally kill people, right?
Yeah.
So this is not on the scale of antisocial behavior. This doesn't really register that much, at all. So I guess I kind of reject the premise where like this is all remarkably antisocial. I think it might be more normal than we're admitting. The whole thing, the whole thing where groups of young men get together and argue. I don't think it generally turns out that harmoniously. No matter what, I don't think it's in the cards.
So, what's more pro-social, doing a blood sports with 1,000 live viewers, or doing a stream where you just talk about what you want to talk about and have only 10 live viewers?
Clearly, the second is more pro-social, but I don't think that either are that meaningfully antisocial or pro-social. I think it's mostly like a question of what you want, and all these interactions are even more voluntary than a group of people meeting in meet space, right? Like anyone can leave at any time. People can get psychological damage from these things, but it reflects their own kind of tendencies and their own weaknesses and their own problems that they have to work out. Um, Even more than say MMA or cage fighting matches reflect the tendencies and the problems of the people who end up there, right? It's not like in a cage fighting arena, the people there were literally forced there at gunpoint. That would be a completely different situation. But as it is, they're there as a reflection of their own tendencies, of their own desires. And if it wasn't expressed in that way, it might be expressed in another way. Um, so there's some responsibility for the people who run the cage match, but not that much, right? I don't think it's fundamentally just taking human energies that would be that exist in this direction, in this kind of antisocial, angry direction.
How much responsibility do you think I bear for asking Casey to do some shows on Mein Kampf?
Oh, none really. I mean, you're kind of being a scholar, to be honest. I mean, you're being someone who you're approaching things in a scholarly manner. In If it's wrong to do what you did in exploring, Hitler's ideology, then the whole Western civilization is wrong in terms of how it approaches these questions, which it might be, but I don't think that anything you did there was out of bounds at all, in terms of exploring these ideas as honestly and as forthrightly as you could.
How
Um,
do you then understand an English literature professor who's married, who's about 40 years of age, who's got kids, and then spirals, it seems, after reading Mein Kampf? How do you understand that?
I think a lot of people have not been exposed to an honest discussion about history and an honest exploration of ideologies, and it's not that much of a surprise to me that it would destabilize people, especially people who are Christian. Frankly, I think people who are Christian, um, at any time really, but especially today, it kind of um, reflects a lack of exploration and a vulnerability to new ideologies, to new ideas, because people who freely explore, um, who freely explore ideologies, who freely explore philosophy and all that stuff, they generally don't end up vanilla Christians. Maybe they end up some kind of non-denominational crazy thing, but they don't end up being vanilla Christians almost ever, as far as I can see. So Christians are pretty vulnerable to this, and then that's why Christianity is dying. That's why Christian the prevalence of Christianity is dropping like a stone, because it's very vulnerable to free exploration. Maybe everything is, but Christianity definitely is.
It seems for people like Casey and Nick Fuentes, the Christ is King is just a much more appealing banner for their politics rather than white is right.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a way of being sneakily anti-Semitic, or not that sneakily anti-Semitic. Um, but no, it's more than that. It's also, a righteous anger at the changes that have come over society, which have wrong-footed lots of people, right? Like, let's not forget that context is that we've had a giant social revolution, and there have been casualties, and among these casualties are sexual standards and social standards that would result in certain benefits for some people, and yeah, like certainly we're seeing child abuse on a level that we wouldn't have seen. Like that's an allegation of the right, and it's correct. We're seeing the sexualization of children, in a very frightening and probably harmful way. We're seeing the breakdown of the family. We're seeing uh you know the shattering or the tearing of the social weave, and young men not getting married, and the kind of a Japanification, a splitting of the sexes, and all this kind of stuff. So they're angry, and the problem is that there's not really a coherent banner to stand under, and Christianity included is not really a coherent banner to stand under, because many Christians are in support of all this stuff that's going on, right? But there's no counter movement to all of this, uh, that is more coherent than just saying that you're Christian, I guess. right? There's no secular conservatism to really point to. That's kind of the big failure of Western intellectuals is that they haven't produced a coherent secular conservative perspective.
And what's your perspective on Mr. Metokur?
I think, yeah, he's a very scornful individual. He likes to make fun of people and be aloof and all that sort of thing. Kind of a comedian type, like a comedian journalist hybrid. Um, I watched his videos, his internet aristocrat videos back in the day. Um,
I mean, he's very good at what he does. He's
yeah,
like
he's funny.
he's a crash course in reality.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I don't think that he's. I think he's very good at spinning a narrative. I'm not sure that his narrative is all that accurate. Um, yeah, he was very good at sort of giving out the pro Gamergate perspective back in the day, and he did all these kind of he's like a journalist. Basically, what I think of him is he's basically a new age journalist and has all the problems that you see with journalists. Like they like to pull a story together, and generally uh, at the cost of the truth, because the truth is usually not neat. Truth is usually not neat and clean and coming together in one simple narrative.
And what's your perspective on Ethan Ralph?
Um, Very Alex Jones like, with his divorce and his health problems and his yeah, very Alex Jones like a little mini Alex Jones, uh, and also unhealthy, very unhealthy. It seems to me.
And how much have you found your internet, your virtual personality has affected your real life person?
Well, the show I was on was very small, so pretty much nobody saw it, and that was basically the beginning and end of it, right? Um, I don't think it had a big psychological effect on me. I think that, like, in terms of being like internet blood sports and arguing and all that stuff, I mean, it was just a different version of that, but it's something I've been doing for my whole life, frankly, is arguing online about politics and ideology, and yeah, this was just a new incarnation of that. It wasn't like it didn't end up having a very profound effect.
And I'm thinking
I'd
one.
say that
Go ahead.
I would say that listening to you without talking to you probably had a bigger effect on like my ideological thinking, right? Like I still credit you with bringing a lot of clarity to the problems with dissident right and the way that they would avoid pointing to their own, you know, the whole movement basically pretended to be intellectually honest and forthrightly, well, yeah, this is the story all the time, every time, right? They paint themselves as being the unflinching guardians of the truth, and then when they come upon a truth that is inconvenient for them, they suddenly turn into everybody else, and that's something that you uncovered very adeptly. I think it's sort of your story, probably in all these groups, is you're doing this over and over and over again, and you're very good at it. And yeah, that I think that I admire the clarity with which you you approach that situation. So yeah, I think you had a pretty big effect on me, but my participation in the show, not so much.
What are your views on Curtis Yarvin?
I think he's careless. I think he's loose with the facts, and that's a big flaw. Is that he's a little bit loose with the facts, and the facts are important. And he claims to be, again, the forthright sword of truth. But yeah, like if you saw his conversation with Michael Anton, I think Michael Anton had a much more accurate view of history, for example. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
Curtis Yarvin doesn't seem to have a very accurate understanding of his own limits and his own knowledge. He seems to have a vastly exaggerated sense of his own learning.
I don't think he's definitely knows a lot, and I think he has a lot of interesting and provocative writing. I don't think he's an idiot, but I do think that, like many people, like what's his face, the Guns, Germs, and Steel author,
Yeah,
he's
Jared Diamond. Yeah.
yeah, he takes liberties with the truth. So that's annoying,
Well,
especially
with
with
Curtis
YouTube.
Yarvin, he's such an autodidact, and so this is common with autodidacts, the self-taught, that they have no understanding of the limits of their own knowledge, and so I just find it unbearable listening to Curtis Yarvin that he's pronouncing on all sorts of things that he doesn't know very much about. While if you try to get away with that in the academy, you'd be smacked down fairly quickly.
Yeah, of course, in the academy, you'll be slapped down for telling the truth in a lot of cases too. So there's your upside and there's your downside there. Um, I mean, you probably know how I think about this. I mean, I view the academy as a whole to be far more insidious than Curtis Yarvin, because you'll see um, a lot of rigor and a lot of honesty in a lot of areas, but then in certain crucial areas, that will be absent or reversed. So it's like the Nazis. The Nazis were, um, brilliant scientists. They knew a whole lot. They were great engineers. There was a lot of rigor there, but there was also a certain bent, a certain perspective, a certain unwillingness to accept new facts when they were inconvenient to the ideology or the current campaign of the uh, of the ruling class or the ruling ideology. And so you can have like people who are brilliant and knowledgeable and unaligned, right? The alignment can be the most important thing. You know, you can have a warship with beautifully engineered steam turbines and cannons and full fuel bays and all this stuff and how wonderful it is. But it can be a warship that's steaming towards you to shoot you, or it can be a warship that's steaming towards the enemy to defend you. And they look basically the same. And there was the same rigor, maybe even more rigor in the way the Japanese built their weapons, but they were directed in a very negative way. And that's what you have to look at, is what direction they're steaming in, and what they're shooting at. And the academy is shooting in the wrong direction, and Curtis Yarvin is shooting in the right direction, and that deserves quite a lot of emphasis.
And what do you make of Tucker Carlson, and how much do you consume?
I like him. I subscribe to Fox and Friends just to get his Tucker Carlson Today Show and watch his Curtis Yarvin interviews and some other interviews. I liked his Michael Anton interview. Recently, I liked his Amy Wax interview, but it's interspersed with these unbearable, I don't know, just idiots. So yeah, Tucker Carlson has these moments of insight interspersed with just utter lunacy. He has his UFO craze, for example, all kinds of like just kind of lowbrow, in my opinion, low IQ stuff. But then he also has a lot of sophisticated stuff, and he's pointed in the right direction. So I like him. I think many of his conversations are stand the test of time. They're interesting. Uh, yeah, I like Michael Anton too. By the way, like a similar story.
Tell me more about Anton, because I was a huge fan of Anton, and then I just
And then the,
found him increasingly reckless, with reckless disregard for the truth, particularly vis-a-vis
yeah,
the
yeah, like
2020 election.
yeah, the election thing. Like everybody's lying about that apparently. Yeah, I mean, a liar. No, no, I think, but all these members of groups are liars. Okay, like anyone who finds themselves a member of a group and intellectually and stays in that group and doesn't find himself at odds with them, right? The only way to do that is to be a liar, right? Or to be hive minded in such a way that you believe you're not lying when you are. So I just have different expectations than you, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, to circle back to the personal, it seems like you have this thing where you'll admire a group, and then you'll see its hypocrisy, its lies, its deception, and then you'll be turned off by it. And that's good in some ways, but um, just you know, maybe part of it is motivated by some belief or some confusion that maybe there's some group that doesn't do this. Maybe there's some group that rises beyond these tendencies, and there isn't. They're all like this. Every one. You'll never find a group that doesn't lie, that doesn't have its groupthink, its deception, its selfishness, all that stuff. So it's true of the American right and the American New Right and the American alt right and all that stuff. It's all like that. So Anton is a member of the American New Right, the National Conservative Movement, and as such, he will lie to defend it, or he will engage in groupthink. He will believe absurdities in order to be a member of this group and to defend his perspective.
So Tucker Carlson did a special on the end of masculinity where he featured a bloke talking about how important it was to get sunshine on your testicles. You've probably gotten more sunshine on your testicles than anyone I've ever spoken to. Can you talk about the benefits that you receive from this?
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, it's just typical quack stuff, I guess, right? It's like, well, sun is important, true. Your balls are important, true. So sun on your balls, that's double important. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. It's fairly harmless, I suppose. Hopefully.
So the New York Times did a big three-parter on Tucker Carlson. I read it, didn't find much in it that I didn't already know. Didn't particularly move me one way or another. But Tucker is going to speak in Iowa. So do you think Tucker is a realistic candidate for president in 2024?
Trump is going to destroy everybody unless he has a health problem. If Trump has like a health crisis, then maybe someone else can win. But otherwise, and that somebody's going to be DeSantis. But if it's not, but if Trump can run as healthy Trump, he's going to annihilate everybody and win the nomination. And then, yeah, we'll see what happens after that. I think DeSantis is the next in line, pretty solidly.
How viable a candidate for president do you think Tucker Carlson is, just on his own merits?
I don't know.
Would
I think
that
he's
excite
vulnerable.
you? Would that excite you, a Tucker candidacy?
Not really. No, I prefer him in his role as he is. Uh, I think we want these DeSantis types. We want these kind of operators, right? Um, we want people who like at least Trump had some business experience, right? Getting things done. We saw how that worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like ideally, like politicians who are aligned, like DeSantis is. DeSantis is on board with the whole anti-woke thing, and he's experienced. He's held a higher office, and he's governed. So we want people like that, and we want to drive things home, dismantle the administrative state, yada yada yada. That kind of thing. Dismantle? Did I say dismantle? I mean just replace them with our guys.
And how effective do you think DeSantis is for our side?
I think pretty effective. I mean, he seems like a decent governor. He gets the things he wants done. So I think pretty effective. And I think the conservative movement is moving in a nice direction, right? The education polarization has resulted in a movement that they genuinely believe that the election was stolen, that they won the election. Biden was at plus 7% in the independent polling, and he won the election, and they think that he lost it. So that means that for the foreseeable future, they're going to believe they won every election, which is nice. It's a morale boost.
So what's your perspective on Russia versus Ukraine? What are the things that you're thinking about vis-a-vis that conflict and its potential to create a bigger conflagration in the world?
My tendency is to be gloomy, but when this started, this was what I sort of outlined as my ideal outcome, is that Russia invades, but it's not successful and it pays a big price, right? Like if Russia invades and it ends quickly with a Russian victory, that's pretty bad because it's an invitation for Russia to invade the next country and the next and the next. It just is, right? Weakness is provocative. Weakness invites invasion. The way it's happened now is that Russia is sort of bogged down there for the indefinite future, and maybe they'll be stuck there, and it'll be isolated to that region. However, that region is pretty important. The Russia-Ukraine area, a lot of the world's food, a lot of the world's oil comes from those two countries. So it's pretty disruptive, but at least Russia is being bogged down and it's not going in in totally unpredictable ways. They've reduced the scale of their ambitions to the Donbass, and they might not even get that. So yeah, or the Novorossiya rather. They've reduced the scale of their ambitions to Novorossiya, and they might not even get that.
So, what are the chances of nuclear war from this?
This doesn't meaningfully impact the nuclear situation at all. It's just psychology. It's all about the psychological impact this has on the key players, which are Joseph R. Biden and Vladimir Putin. So what psychological impact is it having? Well, Putin seems a little agitated. He seems wrong-footed by this. Biden is now calling for Putin to be ousted. So seems to have increased the risk of a nuclear war significantly because both sides are now considerably more hostile and also more insecure than they were previously. So,
Well,
yeah,
given
maybe
how given how inept Russia's military appears, if Russia does get into a fight with NATO, NATO will absolutely destroy them, just wipe the floor with them, which would then leave Russia with a choice between retreating to its own borders with its tail between its legs or going nuclear. So that would be a dangerous dilemma, I would think.
yeah. There's not going to be a all-out war between NATO and Russia, conventional war, because Russia will, under these, Russia was already inclined to go nuclear, tactical nuclear, before this. Now this will be completely cemented that they have no chance unless they use tactical nuclear weapons. So they will, if there's a war between Russia and NATO. And maybe who knows how that'll go. We have no precedent for this. We don't know. We don't know what the reaction is going to be. One underrated possibility, I think, is that the escalate to de-escalate framework will work. Russia will use some nukes. People will realize that they're serious and treat them like North Korea. Like we haven't invaded North Korea. We're hostile to them. We're implacably hostile. They're implacably hostile to us. But we kind of just have our own separate spheres, and we don't interact any more than we need to.
Wait, but you said Russia may use some nukes. North Korea has not exploded nukes on other people, so this would be very different. I mean, if Russia starts dropping nuclear bombs on Kiev, what do you think would happen? Or on Warsaw?
Oh, you would see, yeah, I mean, I think it would harden into a North Korea type situation where we're just attempting to isolate them. I don't think we would nuke Russia in retaliation for Russia nuking Ukraine or even Poland. I think we want to posture that, but I don't think we would do that because there's a material difference between some Eastern European countries getting nuked and every American city getting nuked. So the way we want to posture is that not one step beyond this line shall you go, Vladimir Putin, without us nuking you with everything we have. But we don't want to have every American city nuked. That would be a big victory for China if every single American city was reduced to ruins. So I don't think we're going to let that happen. We would definitely, though, what we would definitely do in that situation is we'd be willing to nuke Russia to stop them from taking anything over. Like we'd be willing to go scorched earth on Russia outside of Russia's borders. Outside of Russia's borders, we'd be willing to go scorched earth on them. So I think it would realistically lead to like a kind of a charred, buffer zone between the nuclear powers, and they'd be utterly hostile to each other forever, like North Korea and the rest of the world, and that'd be it. Just a very, very grim standoff, akin to if the Nazis got nukes and we got nukes at the same time, and we just stared at each other, hatefully. But I don't think that borderland conflicts are going to escalate into nukes tossed at each other's main cities because, like, how much does all of Eastern Europe matter to us? It matters to us about 1,000th as much as even one major city being nuked. So.
And how mentally intact do you think Joe Biden is?
I think he's kind of crazy, but Trump was kind of crazy. We have a long tradition of kind of crazy presidents. He's an establishment type, unlike Trump, so less of a wild card. I think he'll listen to his advisors, and this is really more of a group thing than about Joseph R. Biden's individual thoughts on this. Like I think he has some effect on the margins, but he's not going to order a nuclear strike randomly or something. Trump would not be obeyed if he did that. Biden wouldn't do it in the first place.
And is Joe Biden just a puppet?
No, he's president. He's genuinely president, but he's an establishment president. So he naturally tends to walk along circumscribed paths. And he's almost a lame duck because everyone thinks he's going to lose Congress very soon. So he's a weak president, but he's not a fake president. He's the most powerful person in the country. But you know, I don't think he has any secret agenda. I think his agenda is out there, but he only has Congress on the tiniest of margins, and he's going to lose it soon. So his ability to act is limited.
Who would you say is the most powerful man in the world right now?
Probably Joe Biden. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. Joe Biden is probably the most powerful person in the world. But I think you could make an argument for Xi Jinping because his economy is likely to converge with America's economy size, and he's going to be in charge for life. So, I mean, realistically, if we're not just looking at power today, Xi Jinping is probably the most expected to be the most powerful person in the world. You know, based on the expected value of his whole life in charge.
So I've got a friend who argues that Ron Klain or Barack Obama are more powerful than Joe Biden because Biden's essentially just a puppet of these people.
That's absurd, in my opinion.
That's what I think too. What do you think we should be doing vis-a-vis Iran? Should we be trying to renegotiate and return to that deal that Obama got with Iran?
I think the Iran deal was much maligned, but was basically fine. Yeah, but I do have to go.
Okay.
It was good talking to you, man.
Take care, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks for letting me on again.
Yep.
Like the old days. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Okay. I want to go back to the Decoding the Gurus podcast, play it and discuss it. The hosts are Christopher Kavanagh, anthropologist based in Japan, Matthew Brown, psychologist at the University of Central Queensland. Their guests are the hosts of the academic podcast, Very Bad Wizards.
But I kind of disagree a bit about it being effective. You know what I mean? You're putting aside the thousands of years of aliens and so on, the actual methods and so on being effective, because that's true, but it's true in a very kind of superficial way. Like those methods, those interpersonal things are always effective, and little experience
in the hands of the right person, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Like I've told this story to Chris, but really briefly, like I was in Japan actually when I went to visit a friend of a friend, and she was into color therapy, and there was all these bottles of different colored oils, and you choose a couple of colors.
Like I am so open, and I at various times, like so interested in these kind of therapies. Like I just enjoy them. I think I probably just enjoy the personal attention. Like I remember one Rosh Hashanah, I met a medical intuitionist, and she recommended to me. She recommended this thing to me, this special color fragrance that would cleanse my aura. And even though I was absolutely broke, over $50,000 in credit card debt, I bought this this $50 bottle of things that I should tap on my forehead and on my neck. I didn't notice any difference, but she did also send me to Dragon Herbs, which was a great recommendation. I got some benefit from going to there.
That appeal to you, and they represent your future and your president and so on. You'd love this, yeah. And the practitioner sits there across from you and stares into your eyes and holds your hands and touches your arm and shoulder, and they talk about you for 30 minutes or so. And so I went along to that, being the skeptic guy, and I loved it. You could feel the power of the interpersonal experience, and you can see how all of these cults, all of these quack kind of things, they always generate a genuine in inverted commas, response, because we're monkeys, and that sort of shit works on us.
So, well, allow me to retort. I don't think I disagree with you. I think though what you're saying, what I'm saying is simply that what the active ingredient is in color therapy is clearly not the colors, it's the connection. And I think that
so this medical intuitionist, so I've used almost the entire bottle. I mean, I've hardly used it the last 10 years, but I feel like I need to get my money's worth. And so this is the equilibrium. It is a balance of herbs and oils. It contains plant and crystal energies. Many people think plant energies are awesome, and other people think, oh, crystal energies are the way to go. But guys, you've got to try the plant and crystal combination if you really want to reap the benefits. And don't just pick up Soma on the basis of what looks good to you. You need to find a practitioner, right? If you want to feel empowered, I mean, there are some wonderful Soma practitioners here to get like the best balance of herbal and plant and crystal energies. Like, you really need them together. So I got equilibrium, and this is how you create an abundantly joyful life. That's what the medical intuitionist told me. Now, she'd just been in a bad car accident, so she said she wasn't really all there. But we traded work. Like, she gave me some of her medical intuition. Oh, this is good. We're all interconnected and interrelated. This is a global community offering Soma consultations in over 40 countries, including England, Japan, and the United States. But I want to find out, trust your intuition, equilibrium bottles. So, okay, let's go to the product. Oh, equilibrium. That's the one I want. Yeah, that's what. See, this is what I got. It harnesses the vibrational powers of Mother Nature, right? So Soma equilibrium bottles are a system of color, plant, and crystal energies that bring you closer to self-understanding. So Kyle was impressed to some degree with my levels of self-understanding and my understanding of the alt-right. And in retrospect, I think I have to attribute much of those benefits to my equilibrium from Soma. So when you trust your intuition while selecting the equilibrium bottles and applying them regularly, I haven't been applying this regularly enough, probably need a refill. They have the capacity to support you to a deeper consciousness and promote your total well-being. So desire to be brilliant, to be joyous, to be creative, to be happy, to be you. A system of color, plant, and crystal energies that help you become the very best version of yourself using the highest quality organic, biodynamic, and wild-crafted ingredients, right? I got all this in a bottle because it harnesses the vibrational powers of Mother Nature, right? Soma equilibrium bottles are a system of color, plant, and crystal energies that bring you closer to self-understanding. So it's activated when you apply it to the body, and its vibrational energy can be accessed through the ingredients in each equilibrium bottle. The alchemy is in your hands, right? I got alchemy in my hands, and the unique energy in each equilibrium bottle is unlocked when it touches your skin. So let me just give this a scientific test here. Oh, wow. Oh, this stuff really works, guys. This stuff really, really works. This is fair dinkum. Oh, yeah. I was told to put it, I think, on my forehead and on the back of my neck. I remember with the women, like, best way to seduce them was to, God forbid, to kiss the back of their neck. Because we have more bones connecting with bones, more joints in the neck than anywhere else in the body. So the neck is super sensitive. So, oh, yeah. Oh, boy, I'm starting to feel my chakras opening up. You notice my aura changing color right now? So this is created to correspond with the 7 chakra centers in your body that energy flows through. And equilibrium brings ease, balance, and calm to your energetic system. I mean, who would not want these benefits, right? At the same time, and that's not all. That's not all. Like, Diana, it would have been enough for me to get, like, my money's worth, $50 bottle, if all this did was bring ease, balance, and calm to my energetic system. Diana, it also strengthens and protects the aura to empower you and elevate your consciousness. So to stand in front of the various color combinations contained within the equilibrium bottles and select those which you feel drawn to most, that's the first step, guys. Right? The colors draw you in, because the colors, you are drawn to the colors you need, and then you can then activate the vibrational energy of the ingredients in each equilibrium by shaking the bottle and applying it to the body. So the alchemy is in your hands. The unique energy in each equilibrium bottle is unlocked when it touches your skin. Thank God for Aura Soma. Just changed my life. Aura Soma made me the man I am today.
The method, the process that they're using in this movie is more on the face of it what it says it is, forcing an interpersonal connection, right? So it is simply saying, now you tell me some vulnerable shit. No, I'm going to ask you again. I'm going to ask you again. There's no pretense that there is like because I think psychics do the same thing, right? They forge this connection, which is pseudo. It's falsely. Yeah.
Whoa, guys! I formed a genuine connection with my psychic so much she like built me for about $900, and I did get one unsolicited email from Dennis Prager out of it, so it was totally worth it.
I mean, if one chooses to ignore the thousands of years of evidence, but this one, it's more laid bare. I don't think this is good therapeutic practice by any means, but I do think that I guess I would call it like a ice-breaking exercise on steroids, right? Forcing.
And let me add to that it's all well and good to say I'm sure it's true that.
And guys, for the next 5 days only, if you put in the promo code 40, you will get 15% off your Aura Soma.
There are better ways to make this kind of connection that don't involve a lot of this spooky shit. But that isn't.
Each and every one of these bottles has the power of the Lord Jesus in it, in seriously holy colored water. Before long, Luke will be doing chaos magic rituals on stream. This product reminds me of religion. Being an antisocial schizoid is the fundamental characteristic of the alt-right. Promo code blinding white teeth. Yeah, it's fake, but it works. 40, you do much better with a guest host. Agreed. Is 40 drinking cologne again? It's not cologne. It's Aura Soma, bro. It's got natural plant and crystal energies. Luke is turning into a Giga Chad right before our eyes. Doesn't have modafinil in it. It's BS. My sister would love this stuff. It's always women, too, that buy into spirituality and quack therapy disavow. Now, you really need that snake energy, the Kundalini. Have you guys activated your Kundalini lately? Michael Anton, Curtis Yarvin, equally unimpressive in their debate. I can imagine. Cognitive behavioral therapy and antidepressants would help the vast majority of people, but most people are too self-obsessed and not reflective to follow the advice of doctors. Kyle versus the world with some good streaming content. I agree. Defend the Constitution. It defends you.
Happening to Freddie Quell, right? Like, so this is what he has. This is what's on offer for a lot of these people. It's that or nothing. And so they get that, and that is really important. It's not like the other option that the movie seems to lay out is, tell me what this thing is that.
Right. This is so important when people denigrate, say, the community created online or a community created on a YouTube live stream. You have to evaluate everything compared to what? Okay, so like getting married and having kids is obviously going to usually be much more fulfilling and better for you than spending your life on live streams. But that's not usually the thing that people are weighing up. People are weighing up being on a live stream versus gaming. And so being part of a YouTube live stream community may be better for you in some instances for some streams than gaming. Or people may be going out to play golf. So sometimes it's probably better to go out and play golf than participate in a live stream. Other times participating in a live stream. And there's real life community being created here. Like people have employed each other from this channel. People have gone to bed with each other from this channel. People have built real world friendships. People have built businesses. People are building a hedge fund from with other people that they've met on this show. So we're small, but we're powerful.
Looks obviously like a vagina.
Right, exactly.
That's the other option that they have is that.
And back to the discussion of whether or not Philip Seymour Hoffman was trying to sick his dog, whether he was trying to do this or not. I actually read these interactions as reflecting something different. I don't think that he really wanted Joaquin Phoenix, Freddy, to go kick ass. I think that what is seeming like indecision is that throughout this whole movie, I think he's trying to figure out why he likes Freddy. And I think one of the things is that this guy his impulsiveness is something that Dodd doesn't have and that he kind of likes. I think his lust for life is too positive, but the whole thing that he's calling humans animalistic, right? He hates the fart, but he laughs at it. And he ends up concluding that laughter is really important but I think he is stuck in believing that we should rise above our animal nature. But there is something that is so appealing about Freddy's animalistic nature that he's attracted to. Yeah,
that's totally true. At several points in the movie, they really emphasize the animal nature of Freddy.
And I think he can't even tell whether or not he wants Freddy sexually. I think it's unclear. Yeah.
But I think you're right. It's interesting. Like the self-concept of Dodd is that, and this aligns perfectly with Scientology, is that idea of ascending to this sort of spiritual realm that is and completely divorced from your animal nature. But like I was saying, I just picked up lots of hints that he wasn't happy.
Absolutely. He's miserable. But I think Freddy is showing him that he's miserable about something. That he's given up this part of life.
Yeah. And kind of the only times you see him laugh.
So all sorts of people are back on Twitter. All right. So Elon Musk appearing poised to take over Twitter has had many beneficial effects already. So I noticed there's already freer speech. I believe you can challenge the validity of the 2020 election, which I do not agree with, but I agree with the freedom to be able to do that. And Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, built $1 billion business. So on the one hand, Mike Lindell has often shown himself to be a buffoon. On the other hand, he's built $1 billion business. Right? He's not just a buffoon. Right? People are not just the worst aspect of themselves.
Yeah.
That line that he says at the end where Freddy is leaving him and he says, if you figure out a way to live without serving a master, any master, then let the rest of us know. For you'd be the first, something like
that. That's a good point. If you found a way to live without serving a master. So all men are slaves. All right. Virtuous men are slaves to virtue and bad men are slaves to their appetites. But most people need a master. I think that's profound.
Like that. Like, I think he sees in Freddy something that even though he's a completely broken, aimless soul, like he sees in him, you can actually live in this way where you're not beholden to some source of meaning. And
so I have a rule when it comes to dating. I will not date any woman who is worse than me at reading social cues. So pretty much every girlfriend I've ever had has been better than me except one. Okay, so that was a big warning sign. She would carry her laptop into shul on Shabbat because she didn't want it stolen from her car. She worked at a public radio station, and so she would say to my friends, "Oh, we're having a fundraising drive. Please call in and contribute." I was like many embarrassing things. And she was at this table where the rabbi, I wasn't there, the rabbi was hosting a Shabbat lunch, and he said, a lot of great people in this community, but there's one person you have to watch out for, Luke Ford. And my ex-girlfriend stood up for me. She said, well, he's okay when he's on his lithium, but he's too vain to take his lithium every day. So then he goes a little nuts. So that's Christine Palmer. She died about 14 months ago, unexpectedly, just like some kind of brain aneurysm. So we were together from 2007 to 2008.
that is appealing to him because he also feels lost too.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just to extend on that. So Dodd is kind of the leader of the cult, right? He's the master. But he's
is he?
I know. This is where I'm going. Like, it's full of schemes and organizations and boats. And then they move to London and they're going to set up things there. And you can just you get a sense of all of the sort of Freudian ego type strategizing that sort of dominates every little thing that they do. And his wife is the full-on believer and a powerful character. And in a way, he's like the tails wagging the dog. He's a little bit of a prisoner of this construct that he's created.
There was an element in the character of Freddy I find interesting was that while he was presented, this kind of animalistic force, right? Like when you saw from his perspective, it took me quite a while to work out that's what's happening when you saw suddenly all the women being naked in one scene. I actually thought for a while, so is this showing like Dodd commanded all women to become naked?
Oh yeah, I was confused. Yeah. I watched that scene 3 times.
Yeah, just
or more. Yeah, not for the boobs, but
Is there like an accepted interpretation? My interpretation is it's clearly from his perspective, and he's an actor. But
okay. Anyway, with Christine Palmer and some other women that I've dated, obviously the sane women were going to date me. But I noticed with her that she'd been in all these feuds, which even at my low level of mental health and recovery, I recognize this is not a good sign that she'd been in these very intense feuds. And so it's a giveaway that you're with someone who's dangerous, right? If they have a large number of crazy people in their past, right? If they're telling you about all these crazy people, like these jealous people, these bipolar people, these alcoholic people, all right? All right, someone who's in all these nasty feuds and someone who's had a lot of crazy people in their past, all right, they're going to smear you the same way to the next target. It's a big warning sign, right? You don't want to be with someone who's in a lot of feuds, someone who provokes jealousy and rivalries while maintaining their cover of innocence. They once directed all their attention to you, which makes it confusing when they withdraw their attention and focus on others. Idealizing you, love bombing you, and flattering you. Right? When you first meet, things go extremely fast. They tell you how much they have in common with you, how perfect you are for them. So like a chameleon, they mirror your hopes and dreams and insecurities to form an immediate bond of trust and excitement. They constantly initiate communication, seem to be fascinated with you on every level. Right? If you have a Facebook page, they might plaster it with songs, compliments, poems, and inside jokes. That's a terrific sign that you're dealing with a psychopath. Compares you to everyone else in their life. They compare you to ex-lovers, friends, family members, and your eventual replacement. So when they're idealizing you, they make you feel special by telling you how much better you are than these other people. And then when they're devaluing you, they use these comparisons to make you feel jealous and inferior. Another sign that you're dealing with a psychopath, the qualities they once claimed to admire in you suddenly become glaring faults. So at first they appeal to your deepest vanities and vulnerabilities. They observe and mimic exactly what they think you want to hear. But after you're hooked, they start using these things against you, and you spent more and more time trying to prove yourself worthy to the very person who said you were great. Then cracks in their mask. There are fleeting moments when the charming, cute, innocent persona is replaced by something else entirely. You see a side of them that never came out during the idealization phase. There's a side that is cold, inconsiderate, and manipulative. You start to notice their personality just does not add up, that the person you fell in love with doesn't actually seem to exist. Another sign you're dealing with a psychopath, they are easily bored. Right? They're constantly surrounded by other people, stimulated and praised at all times. They can't tolerate being alone for an extended period of time. They become quickly uninterested by anything that doesn't directly impact them in a positive or thrilling way. First, you might think they're exciting and worldly, and you feel inferior for preferring familiarity and consistency.
Yeah.
I think the camera work is what gives us that. I think that the director is trying to tell us that. But there is something I want to talk about that scene when Chris is done. Yeah.
So I think that scene, various other ones like are presenting the parallel and the imagery of like, he's an animal, he's a dog. That's very clear. But there's also this like weird part. And I liked it because it reminded me of this short story I heard when I was at school in Northern Ireland called The Potching Maker.
I'm the host, Christine Palma. Tonight we have people here at the radio station. Check it out.
Well, that's not the right link. So this is my ex. Just I was wondering why she wasn't responding to my emails, and I Googled her and found out that she'd died.
You're listening to KXLU Los Angeles.
She was public affairs director at the Loyola Marymount radio station for about 15 years.
88.9 FM, and the program is Echo in the Sense. I'm the host, Christine Palma. Tonight, we have people here at the radio station. Check it out.
Whoa. That's probably going to give me some copyright violation, so... Okay, we'll turn off the music.
Right, the people who brewed their home alcohol, and in that story, it was a school teacher, I think. I looked it up, and it was like a short story from the 70s. But that skill he has, right, where he's making like these kind of potions out of deadly things like paint thinners and so on. But the camera work presents it as, in a sense, he has some sort of science or mechanical skill, like an artisan, to make these drinks. And I can't remember how Dodd refers to them, but it had this nature that he has some part to him which is like proficient in a skill, albeit it's brewing alcohol.
I totally agree. And remember, this is the thing that first attracts Dodd to him. On the one hand, he's obviously a bootlegger. We can read it straight that way. You know, he was his father's alcoholic and he learned this skill. But it's almost like he has this elixir of life that Dodd wants in on. And when he asks him how he does it, he won't tell him. Yeah. So it's almost like a wizard or a shaman. He's able to craft this elixir, and that's what draws him in. Like, he sees, along with everything else, he sees that Freddie has something that he wants, that he's denied himself for so long.
And vice versa.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is Amy Adams. Peggy Dodd is one of the things that she first asks him is to stop boozing. You know, you can read this as stop your magic, the magic that you have on my husband. And which gets me to that scene. That scene, if you look at Amy Adams in that scene, I think it's the most...
So I've tended to have relationships with two types of women. One, the Christine Palmer type, who is incredibly loving, right? She's just a very loving, nurturing woman, but chaotic, right? Just had a hard time being on time and doing the things that adults do. And then I have relationships with women who are organized and successful, but they then become filled with contempt for me.
This brilliant piece of acting in the whole film is you're distracted by these naked women. I think you're seeing it from the perspective of Freddie. You see Amy Adams catch the camera so we can see it's Freddie. And she does this thing where she knows.
She was so cute. All right. And then after we broke up, she got on various medications and just bloated up. But until about 2008, she was just such a cutie. And then the medications caused her to gain about 20 pounds.
Notices the way that Freddie is looking, but then she looks up at Dodd and then looks right back at Freddie as if to notice that there's something going on in that dynamic. And then that's where right after she goes and jerks him off and she says, you could do whatever you want, but not this. I think that there's an allusion there to that chemistry.
Nobody that other people I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's in Matt and I were actually talking about it. And I think there is in lots of the things, there's ambiguity, right? Because it's not explicit.
So when I was taking Alexander Technique lessons, I bought 3 lessons for friends. And 2 of my friends made an appointment, showed up. Christine, typically for her, she didn't get the appointment date right. So she burned it because I bought an appointment for her. She didn't show up. So it was a waste of $100.
Explicit that it's referencing like homosexual urges. It could be just...
right.
Not at all.
It could be 3 different things at the same time, right?
Yeah. But did you guys read it that there was like a homoerotic going both ways or one way, or how did you read that relationship?
Actually, I read it less like that, even though it's almost begging you to interpret that way. I read it more as a father-son kind of relationship. And
well, that's not inconsistent.
no, I guess
Oedipus.
Well, I don't know what kind of like family you grew up in.
It was only his
Oedipus
aunt.
was just interested in his mom. He killed his dad.
He was only fucking his aunt.
But I guess my point is, like, I think that's the thing that it seems like Joaquin Phoenix or Freddie is hungering for, but at the same time can't commit to. So I didn't come down on the clearly this is two men that are trying to get with each other, but can't bring themselves to admit that. But
So I met her at the LA Press Club in 2007, and she told me she was working on a book about robots, and she was volunteering at the LA Press Club, and she was also sleeping there. And so it was so incredibly exciting those first few weeks because I was able to like bring her into my life. There aren't many women who I could bring into my life, my world, my apartment, and it would be a step up for them. But my apartment was a better place for her than sleeping in her car or sleeping in the LA Press Club. And I got intoxicated by like taking care of her and taking her out to eat and you know, putting her up at my place. And she was incredibly flexible. She'd, you know, go along with pretty much anything I wanted to do because I guess she was in a bad place, being semi-homeless, sleeping in the car or sleeping at the LA Press Club. And that was so intoxicating for the first few weeks. And then it quickly started to feel like a millstone around my neck. So I guess I learned in one of my 12-step programs that the desire to rescue or the desire to be rescued, you know, comes from a similar dysfunctional place. So for the first 2 months, it was incredibly exciting to rescue her. And then for the next 10 months, it just felt like a millstone around my neck. And what sustained the relationship for the last 6 months is that we took up playing chess. So she was a very aggressive, assertive chess player. And I would go to the library and read all these books on chess so that I could beat her. So when we tired of having sex, we really got into the chess. And our last week together, I took off. We went on a car trip. We drove the one freeway up to San Francisco, went up to Coos Bay in Oregon. Then I took her back to the Napa Valley. To Pacific Union College, spent a Shabbat at Pacific Union College, just rocked up to the home of my former Sabbath school teacher, like late at Friday night, said, hey, can we crash? Then we went to Yosemite for a couple of days. Then we drove home. And the next day I went to a talk at UCLA and met someone else and broke up with Christine.
Could see that reading too.
No, I'm with you, Tamla, and I don't think it's very important whether or not there's some sort of physical thing going on there. Because what's clear is that his wife doesn't approve of him, and other people in the movement don't approve of the presence of this guy. And it's Lancaster Dodd who wants him there and appreciates him, and his wife in particular is.
And a question from Josh Randall: do I support men going their own way? So in some instances, yeah. Generally speaking, no. Right? Generally speaking, you're better off with a woman in your life, but you're not better off with a toxic woman in your life. So in 80% of cases for men, no. But probably in a small percentage of cases, men are better off. But no, overall, going your own way without women, I think, is a bad idea.
It's kind of jealous. Nothing to do with physicality at all. I mean, this is the contradiction, right? He's meant to be the cult leader, and Freddie's meant to be the one that's sort of fallen into it and is the loyal dog. But like, he's too sociopathic or something to actually really care that much.
He's a little touched.
And about the men's rights movement, seems to do some good things. So I think from what I've seen of it, I'm generally favorably disposed towards MRA, the men's rights activists. But you can take anything too far.
As they say in the South. He's like, not all there, right?
Not all there, yeah. So it's actually the master that has this strong thing for Freddie, and Freddie's more casual about it. And so Freddie leaves, right? On the motorcycle, he just burns off, and it's like, it's hard to understand for a little while. And then it's Lancaster Dodd at the very end who sort of begs Freddie to come back. And really, at the very final scene, he's telling Freddie, basically, just don't leave. You have to stay. If you leave again, then I can't. Don't come back. So,
he's conflicted. And I also read that as sort of him, you see when he's driving off in the distance.
So Christine's the only girlfriend I've ever had who I found myself yelling at. I didn't do that with any other girlfriend. So sometimes a combination of two people can become a negative thing for both of them. And so with other girlfriends, they would not have put up with it. They would have said, hey, stop being a jerk. And I would have recognized that they were right. But Christine was so nice and so sweet, and whatever, I just found myself yelling at her, way too much. I don't like that side of myself. I'm embarrassed by my behavior. Wow. I gave her the nickname Fats when she started gaining weight, and yeah, not very nice of me. So this combination started bringing out a really dark side of me.
He's sort of cheering for him to leave, but he also wants him.
He said he's driving fast, like good for him.
Yeah. Good boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll see, I agree absolutely, Matt, that it's not even important really for the movie. What's important is that there is some sort of dynamic there that's intriguing. If you see right before the scene where Philip Seymour Hoffman is dancing and singing, the scene right before that is he's telling the audience that he's in love. And you'll see Joaquin Phoenix looks embarrassed. Like he has this sort of look as if he thinks he might be talking.
I remember I was driving in traffic and I started yelling at another driver when Christine was in the car. I started yelling at the other driver and said, I think I yelled out like, hey, Fats, get out of the way. And like Christine said, wait, I thought that was my special name. And so she was annoyed and upset that I was taking her special name and applying it to others. So that's a big no-no I've learned with women. You need to have that special name, special connection with them that you don't share with anyone else. So a lot of the women I've dated say, oh, look, you share so much of yourself online. Like, what's going to be left that's going to be special and unique just to us?
Talking about him, and maybe this is me imputing something on it, but I think there's a reason for him giving that look. On the face of it, he's talking about his wife. But I think this ties into the whole, she's jealous, she might not know what. And in this era, maybe any homosexual feelings were so repressed that not even they themselves know what's going on between the two men. They might not even realize what's going on. But
and he didn't seem in love with Amy Evan.
No.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So I met Christine at the LA Press Club, and then got her phone number, and like we spoke for like 2 hours the first night. I think I met her on a Wednesday night, talked to her for about 2 hours Thursday night, and then Friday night I wanted to meet up with her or I wanted to take her out, and all the options didn't work for her except to meet at Friday Night Live at Temple Sinai. So the first time we went out was for this Friday night service at Sinai Temple in Westwood. She wanted to go there. And so I never asked her to convert to Judaism. I was thinking this was just going to be kind of a temporary fling, but she took it on herself to convert to Judaism. I would take her to my Orthodox synagogue, and we were a very liberal Orthodox synagogue. And so she said she was interested in Orthodox Judaism, but when she went to convert, she did it on her own. So she went to the University of Judaism, which is conservative, so their conversions are not accepted by the Orthodox. And she didn't consult with me. She just went off and did that. And then I wanted to be supportive, so she asked me to come along to the classes and to a special Shabbat weekend. But she came up fairly near to the end of her conversion to conservative Judaism, and then she said, it doesn't really count with the Orthodox. So yeah, for 24 years, she did a weekly radio program at KXLU. And so she abandoned her conservative Judaism and then started with the Orthodox conversion. And she loved Young Israel Century City. She loved that synagogue. And then eventually, after we broke up, she kept going with her Orthodox conversion for a while, but then eventually gave it up. She was discouraged when her sponsoring rabbi said, look, I'm only going to sponsor you if you go get therapy. I think that the rabbi saw that she was, driving around with all this stuff in her car and picked up some of the dysfunction. And so Christine took great exception to that.
So when he's saying that is a fair way.
But
to
when he says
understand
that, he says, I'm in love. We've all been in love. But he says it in, again, this kind of hollow tone.
Yeah, it was very much like he's a pastor.
And Alexander says, men going their own way seems like a cope for rejected men. Yes, I certainly don't think this is the way to go for most men. Right? We're built to be paired up with a woman. Now, you don't want to get paired up with a woman who's horrible for you or bad for you. Right? Bad people make you feel bad. Good people make you feel good.
At that point.
The only thing I wanted to say related to Dave's point was that something that supports that reading, Dave, is that the indulgence that he later shows Freddie when everybody else is like, this guy's no good, he's dangerous, I think he's a CIA informant. And you get to see the frustration of them trying to make him better. But it is very much like Dodd says, okay, I take all of those things, but he still sees something in Freddie, right? So I think that kind of fits with that reading, that he has some devotion to him that the others don't, whether it's love or not. So that's all.
Then they wrestle on the front lawn.
Yeah. Yeah, which is kind of one of the only times you see Dodd being like happy.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Who do you think this is more about between the two of them? Because in some ways, I think you're tempted to see this to focus on Dodd, but it's in a lot of ways a movie about Freddie Quell, and more broadly speaking, the kind of person that might be drawn to this kind of community.
Glib Medley notes, Luke has an easy time separating people into good and bad. Yes, I have a personality tendency common among narcissists of very easily idealizing and devaluing people. So pretty much all narcissists tend to do this.
Because it's also an interesting question. He can't hold a job. He can't stick to anything, but he does stick with them for much longer than you see him capable of sticking to anything else. Yeah. So what is it about him and his experience that draws him to this? Yeah, these people. Well,
actually, I got to dispute your premise there, because I don't think he is that drawn to them. He fell into them. He boarded the boat on a whim. He sort of gets kicked out and is
So we're talking about the Paul Thomas Anderson 2012 movie, The Master, which is thinly veiled portrayal of a Scientology story. So one of the best books I've read on toxic people is Jordan McKenzie, Psychopath Free. So here are some of the traits of the psychopath. They're into triangulation. They surround themselves with former lovers, potential mates, anyone else who provides them with added attention. This includes people that the psychopath may have previously denounced and declared you superior to. So this makes you feel confused, creates the perception the psychopath is in high demand at all times. Covert abuse. From an early age, most of us were taught to identify physical mistreatment and blatant verbal insults. But with psychopaths, the abuse is not so obvious. You won't even understand that you're in an abusive relationship until long after it's over. Through personalized idealization and subtle devaluation, a psychopath can effectively erode the identity of any chosen target. So I noticed with many of the women I dated, they wanted more effort from me. They wanted me to actively get involved in solving their problems. So when I dated a woman and found out she was in these feuds with her roommates, with her neighbors, that her neighbor had put a nail in her tire, and these women wanted me to go, take charge of this situation, and my response usually was I wanted to run away from such women. So through personalized idealization, subtle devaluation, a psychopath erodes the identity of any chosen target. From an outside perspective, you will appear to have lost it, while the psychopath calmly walks away completely unscathed. Psychopath goes for pity plays and sympathy stories. Their bad behavior always has sob story roots. They claim to behave this way because of an abusive ex, an abusive parent, an abusive cat. They say that all they've ever wanted is some peace and quiet. They say they hate drama, yet there's more drama surrounding them than anyone you've ever known. Psychopaths go through the mean and sweet cycle. Sometimes they shower you with attention. Sometimes they ignore you. Sometimes they criticize you. They treat you differently in public than they do behind closed doors. They could be talking about marriage one day and breaking up the next. You never know where you stand with them. They put forth as little effort as possible and then step it up when you try to disengage from them.
Suitable for all these other contexts. And They feed him, they give him clothes, he gets to go to a party and drink.
He says, everybody's very nice to me here. Like, that's all. That's his,
yeah. So it's like, of course he's going to stay. He'll stay until they kick him out. It's just like he stayed in that other situation.
He doesn't just get kicked out. Like in one case, he attacks a guy in a mall. And in another case,
well, there are reasons for getting kicked out.
yeah. But like, he doesn't do things like that in the community.
I had a question related to that. Like, I couldn't read it myself about the intention. The like two parts were, one, why he attacked the guy in the job when he was the photographer, why he started being aggressive to him. I thought like maybe something to do with Commanders and War or something like that, maybe. But the second one was, oh God, it slipped my mind now. It'll come back. But there was a scene I couldn't interpret, like, oh yeah, that's it, where he gave the alcohol to the man, right? And you've seen before that he was talking with the man and he said, you look like my father. And then they started accusing him of poisoning him. And I thought that he had intentionally poisoned him, but Matt didn't read it like that. And I was kind of curious what.
And question in the chat, anyone here done no cap? So I usually don't use caffeine. I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist where caffeine is a sin. And then over the past 6 years, 7 years, I've used caffeine intermittently. So I would say 90% of the time I don't use caffeine, but then I love having it in the bullpen. All right, so I was up until 12:30 last night watching the end of Ozark. I probably should have used some caffeine this morning, but I love knowing that it's in the bullpen. So if I need to be functional or even more than functional, I can bring it in. It's going to have a dramatic effect on me because I usually don't touch it.
You guys felt about that, and also the scene where you attacked the guy, because I didn't really understand why, except, you know, he's a weird guy.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tyler.
I was just going to say, I didn't see that as intentional, but maybe reckless what he did. And yeah, I think this is somebody who really just has trouble maintaining any kind of connection, even temporary, of I'm going to take your picture for 10 minutes. Like, he really can't do it. He also has clearly like sexual problems, impotence, that is something that is just a general part of his social dysfunction. And that's why I would say that I think even though he ends up leaving them multiple times, there is something about this community that I would say is distinct from when he tries to blend in with other areas of life.
I've formulated a mini theory for your evaluation here in listening to what you guys are saying. One of the things that I think I read in a review was the connection with the theme of family in this movie. The old man that he kills or causes to die.
Yeah, we tend to repeat our relationships with our family into our broader relationships. And so we get this template for how to relate to people from early on in childhood, and then we just tend to keep acting it out. Back to this terrific book, Psychopath Free. Another sign that you're with a psychopath, this person becomes your entire life, spending more of your time with them and their friends, less time with your own network. They are all you think about, all you talk about. You isolate yourself to make yourself more available for them. You cancel plans, eagerly await by the phone for the next communication. So the relationship involves many sacrifices on your end, few on theirs. Arrogance. Despite the humble, sweet image they present in the early stages, you start to notice an unmistakable air of superiority about them. They talk down to you as if you're intellectually deficient and emotionally unstable. They have no shame when it comes to flaunting new targets after the breakup, ensuring that you see how happy they are without you. Another thing I remember about Christine, she hated it when she'd ask me a question and I would respond with Google it. In fact, every woman I've known has hated it when I responded to their questions with Google it. On the other hand, I don't want to enable, pathetic behavior. Like, you shouldn't ask people questions that you can figure out on your own. 29, sign number 29, backstabbing gossip that changes on a whim. They plant little seeds of poison, whisper about everyone, idealize them to their face, and then complain about them behind their backs. Find yourself disliking or resenting people you've never met. You might even feel special for being the only one that she complains to. Once the relationship turns sour, they'll run back to everyone they once insulted to you, lamenting about how crazy you've become. And next one, your feelings. Your natural love and compassion is transformed into overwhelming panic and anxiety. You apologize and cry more than you ever have in your life. You barely sleep. You wake up every morning feeling anxious and unhinged. You have no idea what happened to your old relaxed, fun, easygoing self. After a run-in with a psychopath, you will feel insane, exhausted, drained, shocked, and empty. You tear apart your entire life, spending money, ending friendships, searching for some sort of reason behind it all. From the terrific book, Psychopath Free.
He says, you're like my father. You remind me of my father, right? And then that guy dies. The man in the mall is, he's asking him if he's a family man.
And Roger says, what if coffee and cigarettes are your only hope? Then if coffee and cigarettes are your only hope, then you're probably best clinging to them until you build other hopes in your life. Now, if porn is your only hope, then I think generally speaking, you'd be better off quitting porn and going through the bleakness and the emptiness and the despair, and then finding your way out to a better life. And with all these things, a good 12-step program I have found the most effective, because you go into a 12-step program, you meet people, you get a community, you make friends, you can identify with other people there. They can understand you better often than your own family. So it's easier and quicker to form bonds. You get opportunities to contribute to a community, to volunteer in small ways, such as setting up chairs or making the coffee. You can go outside the meeting and smoke cigarettes with people, and you can get a sponsor, and you can go through intense personal change. But most important, you get that human connection, and 12-step meetings are all about sharing stories that you can resonate with and relate to varying degrees.
And if he's there for his wife and he attacks him, I think he's looking for and unable to find a father figure because he's so destructive. And note, the father that he was trying out, he killed. It seems as if Dodd is taking the elixir and surviving, not dying. He is shown that he's going to take on that role. And I think that one of the reasons he leaves is as he has adopted this surrogate family in a way that it doesn't seem he ever had one. And he plays out an adolescence. And, at the end of adolescence, as anthropologists will tell us, we leave, right? He's actually leaving of his own accord for the first fucking time in his life, right? He's not getting shipped off to war. He's not getting run out of the cabbage farm for killing. He's not getting kicked out of the department store.
Holy
I think
shit,
he's finally found a surrogate father.
I like the movie now.
Yeah, Dave pretends to be a Philistine, but he actually has some insightful film analysis.
I was sitting there going, but so the time that he actually goes back to the girl's house, the girl that he lived.
So I've been going to a lot of singles events recently, and I noticed that the men who are most successful are those who are playful, right? Those who are outgoing. There is such a thing as a more socially effective personality. If you are shy, if you are withdrawn, if you are awkward, if you're lacking in confidence, obviously you're neither going to do particularly well meeting women, but you're also not going to do very well in life in general, right? The socially effective personality is more outgoing than introverted, is more conscientious, is more agreeable than disagreeable, is low in neuroticism, and has above average levels of openness to new experience. So when I'm dating someone, I want someone who's reasonably open to doing something new, right? It's not a lot of fun trying to date and relate to someone who's closed off.
Left and, unsuccessfully reconnects with her. That's kind of what a young adult does after they leave home, right?
Yeah,
it's actually ready
exactly.
to say, yeah, okay.
And when he starts to do the processing at the end in the sex scene, right, where he's trying to get the woman to do the processing, but that fits. That's kind of what you're saying.
Very
that he's
bizarre.
Now become
he's now the father.
The master.
Yeah,
But you don't feel hopeful.
He's the master of that pussy.
It's not good. I agree, Taylor. It wasn't he's mastered this.
Do you get the sense that he's finally able to have sex in that scene? I think so, right?
Well, I hadn't tweaked about the impotence, but
yeah, what's the
right.
impotence? Where are you getting the impotence?
Well, just like he always is like with the girl at the department store, and he kind of falls asleep when they're going out to eat. And then he has these like kind of pre-sex things where he's like, let's fuck to the hot transcribers who are
right.
But we never actually see him able to take any of those to completion.
To support that demo, it does slip out during
but he says put it back in, which means that it can.
I remember my first time with this woman, and I was not as young as I used to be, and I got a little nervous, and she was on top, and then what can I say? I did not equip myself well, and afterwards, this like beautiful woman said, "I've never had that happen to me before." Not a triumph. So. Richard Spencer tweets, Trump returning to Twitter is just a matter of time. The entire business model of alt tech, Parler, Gab, Truth, Getter is conservatives are getting censored. One motivation for Elon Musk to post cringe conservative memes is to cut off the possibility of niche alt tech rising and succeeding. Well, alt tech is arising and succeeding with things like Rumble and things like Odyssey. And Vitalik Buterin tweets, the largest consequence of Elon taking over Twitter may well be not any specific policy decision he makes, but rather the morale effect of his supporters feeling emboldened and his detractors feeling like they are arguing on enemy territory. This is happening already. That's a great point. I mean, think of just the morale boost that people got seeing Donald Trump come out of nowhere, mount a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, and then mount a successful hostile takeover of the American political system.
We don't know if it was successfully. We need a close-up to get to the bottom of this. Yeah.
But you're right, Tamler, that he has pre-sex, and whether or not he's a stud at the end there, it is the first time we see him really do it.
Yeah.
And it in some, and he's lumbering at it, and his processing sucks, right? His idea of processing is like a real stripped out. He's not really doing it right, but he is finally like his own. Yeah.
I also, it's really irrelevant now. It's so irrelevant, but I gotta mention it anyway, that, the stuff you were talking about, the techniques that they kind of work, right? That they break down, even if it isn't, it's better than the fucking inkblot Rorschach test. I also took that as an indictment of those techniques, because it seemed to me to be saying that, yes, these do work, but like getting people to sit opposite each other.
So it's like the pickup artist community. So to a certain degree, many guys will benefit from learning how to be more outgoing and more playful with women. But when it crosses a certain point, it encourages like these antisocial, women-hating, destructive downward spirals that just take over your life. So there are a lot of things, a little bit can be good. So my Alexander Technique teacher, Julia Calder, she was also Neil Strauss's Alexander Technique teacher, and she would go to many of Neil Strauss's seminars and talk about the Alexander Technique. That's how I heard about the Alexander Technique. I heard it was good for posture and for the voice. I knew I needed help with both. And the Neil Strauss book, The Game, said, women like guys with good posture. So I thought, I need to have better posture and learn the Alexander Technique. So Julia would go along to some of Neil Strauss's seminars. So yeah, a little bit of some things can make a dramatic improvement in your life, but too much of anything becomes toxic. You can drink too much water, obviously. Catherine D tweets on Twitter. We hear a lot about the social mobility in America, with the focus usually on the comparative ease of moving up. Less discussed is how easy it is to go down. I think that the downward fall is going to be very fast, not just for us as individuals, but for the entire preppy class. And Mesure responds, preppy is a fashion and a cargo court to a class. It is a result of the pervasive notion in America that you are what you wear, and that you should fake it till you make it.
And stare at each other. And that scene where they're they're supposed to tell truths to each other. These are all things, I don't know if Scientologists specifically do this. I think they do, but like they're associated with cult movements, right? They have these techniques that force intimacy, and that it works. It really works because like Pamela, they've done psychology studies where people have ticked Likert boxes where if you force people to reveal secrets, intimate secrets, afterwards they feel more, like close, because that's what humans do. When they become close to someone, they reveal information. So if you artificially create that, and I felt the movie was saying that these guys are good at doing that. They intuitively or not, they understand how these manipulative things work, and they're using them to draw people in. This could be me layering my own.
Okay, breaking news. We have the first Muslim religious woman appearing on the cover of Playboy.
With a scholarship opportunity. So,
come on, here we go. I want to hear what she has to say.
So if you or someone you know is in college, keep listening. Or just keep listening because I have some things to share with you. I have really been on the journey these days, really getting intimate with my own story and who I've come from. My great-grandmother, who I knew was one of the wisest women to walk the earth, wasn't able to read. My grandmother, who's one of my best friends, wasn't able to finish her formal education, but got the education of the world. My mom, who went to college, got her master's, and runs a nonprofit, was the same person to take me to my writing and reading camps and helped me in my pursuit of being a storyteller. And so that gets me thinking about who comes after me and who comes after us. One of my friends recently said something about us being other people's ancestors, and that just stuck with me, because we are going to be other people's ancestors at some point, and we do have to think about writing their future. So that brings me to this incredible initiative, the Write Her Future program. Lancome and the NAACP have partnered to grant 30 $10,000 scholarships to women of color who are currently pursuing their college education. I myself paid for all of my college and journalism education through scholarships and grants, and this is definitely one I would have applied for. So you can go on lancome.com.
Okay, very inspiring. So here she is. Lovely, lovely Muslim lady. Beautiful. And she's got lots of press. There she is in Vogue. She's a journalist. Journalist Noor Tagouri talks about compassionate storytelling, fighting stigma, and shining a light on the margins. I knew I was going to be a great journalist with the hijab on. So media wonderkind Noor Tagouri makes a forceful case for modesty. So yeah, you don't see that in Playboy very much. So what the heck is happening here? Noor Tagouri Playboy. I mean, please be modest here. Okay. Very inspiring and empowering. So for anyone with preconceived ideas about women who choose to wear a headscarf every day, Noor Tagouri is disorienting. She's simply not what you expect, a 22-year-old journalist. She likes to call herself a storyteller on the verge of becoming this country's first hijab-wearing news anchor. She's an on-air reporter for Newsy, where she provokes the sort of confusion we could use right now by making a surprisingly bold case for modesty. As a badass activist with a passion for demanding change and asking the right questions, accompanied by beauty ad looks, Tagouri forces us to ask ourselves why we have such a hard time wrapping our minds around a young woman who consciously covers her head and won't take no for an answer. Wait, so it's good that she won't take no for an answer, but when I won't take no for an answer, like I get shot up with tear gas. Like I have 911 calls made on me. I get arrested by the police. Like I'm the bad guy because I won't take no for an answer, but she's the good woman because she won't take no for an answer. That's sexism. That's sexism, plain and simple. This is why we need men's rights activists. Like she's being praised for never taking no for an answer. You know who also never took no for an answer? Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein never took no for an answer. Do we venerate Harvey Weinstein because he never took no for an answer? This is anti-Muslim, anti-male discrimination, and I won't stand for it.
Interpretation on top.
Well,
No, I agree.
yeah, it's interesting because whether or not you call it manipulative has just simply to do with whether or not you find the ends appropriate, right? Because you're right, there is actually, like in social psychology, a relationship, they use this method to get two people in the lab to get to know each other really fast, right? It's like a whole technique where you divulge information to each other. And it works. And so the thing is, no, I don't think any of us here would disagree with the claim that cults are effective at giving people these tools to bond with other humans. I think what our judgment is about whether it's fake or not, it has more to do with whether or not we think that the goals of that bonding are manipulative rather than whether or not people have bonded.
It's effective. And also, I think that there's a way to look at this and say, well, all this is doing is just normal intimacy, and it would be much healthier for him to have this intimacy without all the bullshit. But clearly that's not in the cards for him. He has no opportunity to do that in a way that wouldn't involve the...
Right. So what about men who use porn or who patronize prostitutes or strippers who otherwise would not get any from a woman? Right? What are men who are so disfigured or so dysfunctional or so beaten down by life, their only chance for female contact is to pay for it? I mean, I can't get on my high horse about them. I think most men would be better off not patronizing prostitutes. But if that's the only way certain men can get female contact,
these kind of cult-like aspects. So I think it's really asking the question of, for people who are truly lost and aimless and who feel like their existence is kind of a joke, is this something that is actually helpful or beneficial for them, in spite of the fact that there's all this metaphysics behind it that is crazy?
Right. So during a particularly downtime in my life in 2009, when I was transitioning away from being a full-time writer and trying to recreate a new life, I joined up with a yoga studio. And you look so slim, look, eat more, thank you. So during that downtime, I joined this Kundalini yoga studio, and you can find all sorts of arguments online why Kundalini yoga is a cult, why it's bad for your health, why it's bad for your social life, why it's wrecked various people's lives. And I would go to class, and I couldn't do many of the positions because I was so lacking in flexibility. I would go to class, and I wouldn't do many of the procedures because I couldn't do them without tensing and constraining my neck or ingraining like negative muscular hoarding patterns, which I was trying to release through my study of the Alexander technique. So I'd often go there and just kind of lie there in class, and many of the teachings didn't make any sense to me, but I just like the ethos, man. I just liked the tea, the Kundalini tea. I just liked the environment. I just liked the people I met. It was my safe space. So you don't have to believe in the message of a particular group to get some benefit from joining it. So I got a fantastic Jewish girlfriend from joining this Kundalini yoga studio. I became friendly with this woman who became a conservative rabbi who was a regular there, and she told me how she got her smicha, her rabbinic ordination, from two teachers, one at the University of Judaism, and then the other one was Guru Singh at Kundalini Yoga.
Like, is it still better than living this atomized life of bouncing from job to job and never being able to actually have sex, even when...
I remember one time I was looking for a job, and I accurately listed 10. I listed jobs that I held over the previous 12 years, and I listed, even though I only had 2 primary employers over the past 12 years, I listed 5 different jobs on my resume. And when I sent the resume out, I got about a 10% response. So about 10% of the employers that I sent my resume out to, they responded. And then I got this flash insight. I should just list my 2 main employers. So I've had at the time I'd had 2 main employers for 12 years. I should just list them. And when I did that, I got a 50% response rate. Like, people loved that I listed just 2 main employers, because they're used to getting resumes from people who work a year here and a year there and 18 months here. And like, why would you invest in an employee when they're so transactional? Like, I like having, a long-going relationship with a client or with an employer. And I just got a phenomenal response rate. I mean, people were like calling me up, people were pursuing me, people were praising me. It was amazing how that resonated with people, that I wasn't just someone who bounced around. I'm willing to make a commitment. I'm willing to hang in there. All right. A job for me is largely about the relationships that you form with people there, and that I would be a stayer, that, I'd hang in there, and that I'd look at this thing as going long term. And maybe the reason I left was only about the job was moving to a place that wasn't convenient for me. And I just remember how much that resonated with employers.
It's this hot department store worker.
How about, Tamlo, that scene where Dodd tells him no one else likes you, just me, right? Like,
yeah, I've had people say that to me. Or, nobody else gets your sense of humor. I'm the only person. So I've often said something in front of a crowd of 10 people, 20 people, 50 people. And afterwards, one person would come up and say, I really admired that joke. It was pretty risky. It was pretty edgy. Everyone else was offended, but I was laughing inside.
Tells him, did you read that as like he wanted to hurt him, so that he was kind of saying, I'm the only one that recognizes you has merit? Because with my reading of that scene, I keep feeling like I'm a Philistine, is that Freddie actually felt that he had connections with the other people in the group, and then Dodd cruelly told him, none of that's real. I'm the only person that likes you. I'm the only reason you're there. And that felt to me like manipulative and cruel, even if it was true, because it felt like Freddie did feel that he was accepted by the other people. So I just check it. Am I a pea zombie?
I think that I think it's true, but I think what he was saying isn't wrong. Those people were ready to throw him under the bus at the first opportunity, and never mind like the rest of the world that he's always running away from. So I think it's true, but I also think it was maybe a manipulative thing to say at that moment.
I think he was just upset. You know what I mean? Like,
okay, let's get a little bit more here from Noor Tagouri on misrepresentations of Muslims in the media.
I called them terrorists. Everybody I knew, everybody I respected was calling them terrorists. And then I just kept thinking to myself, like, why does it feel wrong? It was because there's already a system in place of what we do with terrorists, and that system surveils and oppresses Muslim, Black, Brown communities.
Journalist Noor Tagouri on Muslim.
Hey everybody, I'm Brittany Jones Cooper, and today's guest is Noor Tagouri, a journalist and producer whose commitment to storytelling has earned her international praise. I've been such a big fan of your work, so I've just been excited to sit and chat with you because you do talk about so many things that I'm also passionate about. Not only are you using social media to your benefit, but you created your own production company called At Your Service. So why was that an important part for you to tell the stories you wanted to tell?
I always wanted to be a journalist, but I always struggled with how I was able to approach stories because I was often told that I had to be extra careful that my story wouldn't be.
So generally speaking, Orthodox Jewish groups side with Muslims on the protecting rights for wearing headscarves or protecting rights to go to a law court within your own religion. So Sharia law, essentially, because traditional Jews operate or are supposed to operate according to halakha, Jewish law. So to then Orthodox Jewish groups generally support the right of Muslims to operate Sharia law courts and the like.
Bias. It's impossible to be unbiased when you're wearing a headscarf. They were consistently politicizing the hijab. You don't say that about someone wearing a cross necklace. And then
Right, think about all the porn stars who wear a cross necklace while they're getting pronged by 15 different parolees.
Realized that my strength in my storytelling was who I was. It was my identity. Every person has a human experience, a human story. They have their own perspective, and that isn't a bad thing. It's a great thing.
Right, because so often you can't control who tells your story, and people feel misrepresented in media.
So the headscarf, all right, that is more jarring to a Western sensibility even than the much more limited hair covering that Orthodox Jewish women do. So the more you jar the sensibility, the more pushback you're going to get. So a headscarf like this is more in your face, more jarring than, say, wearing a yarmulke or just a head covering.
Often.
Or they are just straight up misrepresented. Like, I have been misrepresented more times than I have been properly represented. I really believe that storytelling is a form of service. And so we wanted people to know, like, you can trust us and we're always at your service.
I know President Biden recently lifted the Muslim ban, which many believe was rooted in xenophobia. You mentioned that you've received criticism for flying with a hijab. So can you just take me through the experience of traveling? And again, people not really realizing that people still have those stereotypes in place.
I just kind of had to hack the process because I knew.
Well, why do people have stereotypes? Why do people have stereotypes about Christians, Jews, blacks, Muslims? Because of the behavior of some of the more extreme members of those groups. So stereotypes is a heuristic. It is an energy-saving, attention-saving shorthand that doesn't have to be 100% accurate to be useful. So if there are negative stereotypes about Muslims or about Jews or about blacks or about Christians, that's primarily because of the bad behavior of certain members of those groups.
At certain airports, I would have to come extra early because it was going to be harder. I just picked up on all of these things because I had traumatizing experiences where I would get randomly picked or whatever, and then in front of people get groped. We saw that video, like that viral video experiences.
Wait. So you're wearing, okay, come on now. You're wearing skin-tight jeans and a head covering, and you're wanting to talk about modesty. Right? You can't be a champion of modesty and be promoting yourself with these absolutely skin-tight jeans. Right? That's like being a convert to Orthodox Judaism who once directed a porn movie. I mean, come on.
Where I would get randomly picked or whatever, and then in front of people get groped. We saw.
Yeah, when you stand out and when you represent a controversial in-group, right? You're going to pay a price for that. She doesn't have to wear the headscarf, right? She's choosing this more confrontational way to go through life, just like I choose that when I go through life with a yarmulke, and there's a price to pay, right? Choosing to do your own thing, right, is going to bring you into conflict with the wider community.
I saw that video, like that viral video of the white guy who screamed getting off the plane and was like, I'm on the no-fly list. They're calling me a terrorist.
They kicked me off the plane. They called me a terrorist.
I didn't know that in my lifetime I would see a white man go through the fly list. They're calling me a terrorist.
Okay, this is Nick Fuentes.
They kicked me off the plane. They called me a terrorist.
I didn't know that in my lifetime I would see a white man go through what always happens to Muslims for no reason.
It's just been interesting to see the media adjust that language finally.
What happened at the Capitol? It is domestic terrorism, according to the definition. And I was like, it doesn't really give me a good feeling to call somebody else a terrorist, because white supremacists will never be considered.
Okay, there was a terror aspect to what happened on January 6th, but to call them terrorists, I don't think is fair, because that wasn't primarily what was going on, right? They weren't just randomly killing people, right? There was a terror aspect, so I can see why some would want to call them terrorists, but terrorists are usually people we think of when you say terrorist, someone who blows up a plane, right? Someone who goes into a building and, sets off a bomb, right? These people were raucous demonstrators, some members of which acted in ways that inspired terror. So these were mostly peaceful, peaceful people who were trespassing. And then some of them, the substantial portion, but still a minority, were acting in dangerous, threatening ways.
Terrorists in America, the same way Black, brown, Muslim people have been. And even though it was a win to get the news and to get politicians to finally use that terminology, it's like, thank you, now you have to handle white supremacy. If we continue to call them terrorists, I think that is kind of a cop-out. I know that the more countering terrorism programs that we put in are going to end up hurting our communities.
For me, it was just like another mark on the shift of consciousness we've had around white supremacy in the last year.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that is important. And you're helping people.
Okay. It's been great to be with you again. I think we need to close out with a little song.